On the night of September 20th, 1973, the sky over rural Louisiana was calm. There were no storms pushing in from the Gulf, no urgent weather advisories, no frantic radio transmissions echoing through the darkness. Just a small twin-engine aircraft preparing for a short hop to Texas after a college concert. Less than a mile after takeoff, that aircraft struck a tree. On board was Jim Croce, a rising star whose voice had only just begun to reach every corner of America. He sang about working-class fighters, broken hearts, and the fragile nature of time itself. Songs like Time in a Bottle that now feel almost unbearable to listen to. There was no dramatic mayday, no long descent from high altitude, just a shallow climb into darkness and impact within seconds. 6 people died that night, and nearly 50 years later, the question still lingers quietly beneath the headlines. How does a routine departure become fatal in less than 60 seconds? In September 1973, Jim Croce was not slowing down. He was accelerating. After years of near obscurity, scraping by on small gigs and odd jobs, his breakthrough had finally arrived. Bad Leroy Brown had reached #1. His album Life and Times was climbing the charts. Tour dates were packed tightly across states, sometimes with little rest between performances. Success, when it finally came fast. That Wednesday night, Croce performed at Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Louisiana. It was not a massive arena, just a college venue filled with students who knew the lyrics and sang along. By all accounts, the performance was smooth, professional, warm. After the show, Croce and 5 others headed to Natchitoches Regional Airport. Waiting for them was a Beechcraft E-18S, a twin-engine aircraft built in the 1950s. Reliable for its time, frequently used for charter travel. Not luxurious, but functional. It was the kind of airplane that quietly moved executives, musicians, and small groups between cities without drawing attention. The pilot was 57-year-old Robert N. Elliott, an experienced commercial aviator with thousands of logged flight hours. He was familiar with the aircraft model. The flight plan was straightforward. Depart Natchitoches and fly to Sherman, Texas. Approximately 90 minutes in the air. Weather conditions appeared favorable. Clear visibility. Light winds. No storms in the region. The airport itself was uncontrolled, meaning no active control tower. Pilots announced their intentions over a shared frequency and departed when clear. On paper, nothing about the flight seemed dangerous. But small airports at night carry subtle hazards. Runway 17 extended into darkness. Beyond its end stood a line of trees. The runway lights functioned normally, but the surrounding area was largely unlit. Once airborne, the outside world would quickly become a black void. In those conditions, visual references disappear. Depth perception fades. The horizon becomes difficult to distinguish from the ground. At approximately 10:45 p.m., the Beechcraft began its takeoff roll. Witnesses later said the aircraft lifted off normally, but climbed only slightly. Instead of rising decisively, it seemed to skim just above the treetops. Then, less than a mile beyond the runway, the left wing struck a pecan tree, estimated at about 50 feet tall. The impact was immediate. The aircraft cartwheeled and burst into flames. There was no distress call. The entire sequence, from liftoff to impact, likely lasted under 1 minute. Because the crash occurred so close to the runway, investigators classified it as a takeoff accident, one of the most analyzed categories in aviation safety. Representatives from the Civil Aeronautics Board, the predecessor to today's National Transportation Safety Board, arrived to examine the wreckage. The debris field was compact. That detail alone was telling. The aircraft had not fallen from high altitude. It had not stalled thousands of feet above ground. It had simply failed to climb. Both propellers showed signs of rotation at impact, suggesting the engines were producing power. Fuel was present. There was no clear evidence of catastrophic mechanical failure before the collision, so investigators focused on performance. Takeoff performance depends on multiple variables: aircraft weight, temperature, runway length, wind, and configuration. Louisiana nights in September can be warm and humid. Humidity and temperature affect air density. Thinner air reduces lift and engine efficiency, a factor known as density altitude. Records showed the aircraft was within its allowable weight limits. But within limits does not mean ideal. Every additional pound reduces climb performance. Every degree of temperature changes lift characteristics. On a night departure with trees at the end of the runway, climb margin matters. Witnesses described a shallow ascent. Some said the plane never appeared to rise above 50 feet. One question became central. Why didn't the pilot abort? Pilots are trained that if target airspeed is not reached by a specific point during takeoff, the safest action is to reduce power and stop. After liftoff, if climb performance feels inadequate, lowering the nose to build airspeed can restore lift. But decision-making under pressure is not mechanical. Investigators later learned that Elliott had significant coronary artery disease. There was no conclusive evidence that he suffered a heart attack in flight. But even momentary distraction, discomfort, or slowed cognitive processing during takeoff can narrow options rapidly. Night conditions introduced another hazard, the black hole effect. When departing into an area with little ground lighting and no visible horizon, pilots can misjudge pitch and altitude. An aircraft may feel like it is climbing sufficiently when it is not. A pilot may instinctively pitch upward too aggressively, sacrificing airspeed in an attempt to gain height. Pitch too high, and airspeed decays. Lose enough airspeed, and climb performance collapses. There was no stall warning recorded. No Mayday transmission. Silence suggests the timeline was brutally short. Some theorized a mild downdraft over the tree line. Others suggested that Elliott may have attempted to clear the trees visually, instead of relying strictly on instruments. In darkness, depth perception can deceive even experienced pilots. Another factor stood out. The runway's departure path did not provide a large obstacle-free zone beyond its end. Modern airport standards require greater clear areas. In 1973, those requirements were less stringent. That pecan tree stood exactly where a shallow climb would intersect. There was no dramatic mechanical failure, no explosion midair, no prolonged struggle in the cockpit. Just a marginal climb, a dark horizon, and seconds slipping away. Inside the cabin, passengers likely felt nothing alarming at first. A slight vibration, the angle of ascent, the hum of engines, then branches, then fire. In official language, the cause was simple: failure to clear obstacles during takeoff. In human terms, it was something more unsettling. A routine departure that ran out of margin. Emergency crews arrived quickly, but the post-impact fire had already consumed much of the aircraft. There were no survivors. When names were released, the scale of loss became clear. Jim Croce was dead at 30 years old. So was his guitarist and collaborator, Maury Muleson. Along with them, the pilot and 3 additional passengers. For Croce's wife, Ingrid, the news came in the early hours of the morning. Friends later recalled that Jim had been exhausted from touring. He had spoken about stepping back, about slowing down, about spending more time with his young son. Success had finally arrived, but so had fatigue. There is something haunting about that. Not prophetic, just human. A man considering change and never getting the chance. In the weeks following the crash, the Civil Aeronautics Board finalized its findings. The official cause cited pilot failure to clear obstacles, with contributing factors including night conditions. Pilot health concerns were acknowledged, but not definitively linked. Technically, the case was closed. Emotionally, it never fully resolved. Because nothing dramatic went wrong. There was no violent storm, no catastrophic engine failure, no prolonged struggle in the cockpit, just a climb that never quite developed. In the months after his death, Croce's music surged in popularity. Time in a Bottle was released posthumously and rose to #1. Its lyrics, about wishing for more time, struck listeners with uncomfortable force. His voice filled radios across the country, but he was no longer there to hear it. Aviation history contains many similar accidents from that era: small charter aircraft, modest airports, night departures. Each case different in detail, but similar in pattern. Margin lost. Seconds gone. Altitude never gained. Today, airport design standards are stricter. Obstacle clearance zones are larger. Runway safety areas extend farther. Lessons are written into regulation. But trees still stand beyond runways across the country. Night still erases the horizon. And takeoff remains one of the most critical phases of flight. Jim Croce once sang about saving moments if he could, about holding time still. But on September 20th, 1973, time moved forward without hesitation. The engines roared. The wheels left the ground. The sky turned black beyond the runway lights. And less than 60 seconds later, 6 lives ended in the darkness. Sometimes aviation disasters are loud and dramatic, and sometimes they are quiet. A routine departure, a shallow climb, a tree at the end of a runway, and a rising star cut short.